Hi, Charles SirBookSage here, and this is a weekend reads. It is a stormy Saturday. I was hoping to get out and do some photography today, but there's a big storm blowing through right now, lightning, rain, pretty strong winds. I'm right by the ocean, so the storms, they blow through really fast, but they're pretty fierce and pretty awesome. So it is a reading day for the most part. And I really have two main reading goals this weekend. The first one is finishing up Tangled Web. It's the third novel in Gail Z. Martin's urban fantasy series, Deadly Curiosities. Quick recap, or just basic background. Deadly Curiosities series it's written in first person, follows the POV of Cassidy Kincaid. She owns an antiques and curio shop in Charleston, South Carolina. The whole story is set in Charleston. It's the city itself, the town itself is a big part of the story. And it's a family-owned store. Her family has owned this store for like 350 years. And she, by day, sells antiques and things, but by night, she is part of a secret society that tracks down and isolates and removes artifacts, like any kind of household item that becomes supernaturally active and potentially dangerous. Hence the Deadly Curiosities sort of series name. And she has I guess he's a partner in a way. Her best friend Teague works at the store with her. He's her researcher. He's what's known as a weaver. He has weave magic, where he can weave power and magic into threads, but that also extends to him as a hacker on the internet, where his magic kind of can take him through and hack things that most people can't hack, which is a convenient tool to have when they're researching things. One of my favorite things about Teague as a character is he takes rope and he puts knots in it, and what he does is he stores some of his own magic in the knots. So when they're in the middle of fighting demons or ghosts or malevolent spirits and all sorts of things, when he's being drained, he can take a knot, undo the knot, and then reabsorb the magic back into himself to kind of replenish himself. It's a fun urban fantasy series. And Cassidy has a silent partner who basically is the co-owner of the store, and he's Soren, I think a 400-year-old vampire. And he co-founded this store 300 and something years ago with her ancestor. And there's always one Kincaid in each generation who has some sort of magical ability, who is tasked with running the shop and helping find and neutralize these artifacts. So it's a very diverse cast. It's got a lot of different elements of magic and spiritualism in it. You have the church involved. There's a priest who's a necromancer, you have a medium, you have voodoo and hoodoo, and there's a lot of eclectic mix when it deals with spirituality and supernatural. It would actually make a really good TV show on something like Netflix or the WB. It would fit, particularly in the WB, it would fit right in with their kind of show. It's a lot, but I enjoy them. I like Gail Z. Martin's writing in general. I first started reading her on the high fantasy side of things with her Chronicles of the Necromancer, which also has vampires in it. She's a big vampire fan. So if you're interested in sort of epic high fantasy that with a medieval setting with kings and things, but that also has vampires to give it a different kind of spin, then check out her. The Summoner King is the first book in that series. And just as another aside for the author Gail Z. Martin, one of my favorite things about her is she takes a character from each of her main series, and she writes a whole bunch of short stories that basically go into their backstory, their history. So she gets to do a lot of world building and a lot of fleshing out one of the side characters. And from the Chronicles of the Necromancer, it's Jean-Marc Rahanian, who's this sort of mercenary. To give a Star Wars analogy, he would kind of be the Han Solo kind of character. A mercenary who crosses paths with the protagonist and ends up joining him in his quest and becomes part of that whole thing. And there's a whole host of stories starting when Jean-Marc was a teenager. So we're slowly, through her little short stories, following how he becomes this mercenary, this famous mercenary that we meet in the first book of the Summoner King. And she does the same, I think, for Soren the Vampire. I haven't read the short stories for Deadly Curiosities yet, but she's just compiled a bunch of them into 2 books. So, and Trifles in Folly 1 and Trifles in Folly 2. So once I finish this 3rd novel, I'll dive into those like collection of short stories. It's good. I like that we get to see the history of a character, separate from the main storyline. And so I've got less than 100 pages to go, so I definitely finished that book this weekend. And that brings me to like my main reading priority now for either the next month or the next 2 months, depending. And that is to finally read the Last Chronicles of Thomas Covenant. I recently finished a reread of the 2nd Chronicles in preparation to finally read this Last Chronicles for the very first time. And the Ruins of the Earth, I think, is the title of the first book. The Last Chronicles is I guess a quadrilogy, you would call it, 4 books. The first 2 Chronicles are 2 trilogies. For those who I've talked about Covenant books many, many times, it's one of my all-time favorite series. For those interested in diving into this series, there is a read-along that's actually starting right now. They're going to be doing Lord Fell's Bane, I guess, this month, and then the Ill-Earth War next month, and then The Power That Preserves the 3rd month. 1 book a month. And that's Steve Donahue, Remembered Reads, I think Bookish, and maybe Richardson Reads. So if you go to Steve Donahue's channel or Remembered Reads channel, I know they've got a video about the read-along there. So perfect time for any of you who've been thinking about diving into this story to see what it's about. It's perfect time to follow along with them, because they're all I'm brand new to Bookish's channel. I just discovered his because I found out he was doing this read-along. But Remembered Reads and Steve Donahue are 2 of my favorite channels. So now is the time, if you're interested to dive in and discuss it with them on their channels. So those are my main reading things for me. I have no idea if I'm going to blaze through all 4 of these books in 2 weeks. It's very possible. Donaldson is a writer that just sucks me in personally. He just gets me instantly invested in stories, the way he writes. So we'll see. I read the first chapter last night to start it, and then stopped myself because I needed sleep and I didn't want to be up till 5 o'clock in the morning. I wanted to be able to read fresh. So I want to finish Tangled Web first, and then probably tomorrow I will start in and probably read a decent chunk of this first Covenant book tomorrow. And I also, hopefully, will finally sit my ass down and watch The Arrival. I don't know why I have not watched that movie yet. Everything I hear about it is it's just a great, great science fiction movie. And since the director is going to be directing the new Dune adaptation, I wanted to go and watch this movie. So I've been this ever-growing need for science fiction. It's been quite a while since I really read a lot of sci-fi. So I know that's coming soon. I'm going to end up diving into a science fiction series. Probably after I finish the final Covenant books. I do have another fantasy series lined up. That's a major, major undertaking that I'll also be starting after that. I mentioned that in my last video. But I think I might get into I think it's David Weber's Honor Harrington series. Her, that military sci-fi following her career. I've read On Basilisk Station, I think it is, the very first book. I read that 10, 12 years ago, somewhere around there. And I enjoyed it, but it's a series I'd meant to continue, just didn't get around to it. So I might dive back into that. So we'll see, because I need science fiction. I've been so immersed in just big, huge epic fantasy, and I've got more epic fantasy to go. I want to kind of balance that out because I love science fiction, and it's been way too long since I've really read some of that. I do know that I will be reading Donaldson's Gap series, so that's sci-fi as well. So that's coming up, because I really have been neglecting the science fiction part of what I wanted to one of the reasons I started this channel was to kind of bring attention to some of the more classic sci-fi stories, and I just haven't gotten around to it because I've been so immersed in finishing these big epic fantasy series. But yeah, so it is what it is. Oh, and one final note before I go. I am going to be going to BookNet Fest in Orlando in September. I did my registration yesterday. I have no idea, accommodations-wise, where I'm going to sleep. I don't know yet. I'll figure all that out. I only live a few hours away, so I don't relish a 6-hour round-trip drive both days, but we'll see. I might end up doing that. But I am definitely going to be there the both days of the BookNet Fest. I'm really looking forward to meeting some of my online friends to finally get a chance to say hello in person. It'd be pretty cool. And I've never been to a book convention before, so it'll be a whole new undertaking. The last any kind of like sci-fi fantasy, any convention I've been to was a Comic-Con in New York City, probably in the 80s, so it's been a long time. And so yeah, I am going to, my tea's probably cold at this point. And it's not near the top, so it hasn't been dangerously sloshing around the whole video. Like I've noticed the last couple of videos of mine, I've just been staring at my teacup. Even though I know it didn't spill, I'm still watching my teacup, wondering is it going to spill, even though obviously I recorded it real time, it didn't. But anyway, hopefully the storm blows through fast. It is really a fun part about being right by the ocean now. You get these huge storms that just barrel through, and the wind is just awesome. It's my favorite thing down here is the wind. Yeah, it's just I didn't have that wind where I was in like Western New York. We didn't get it at all like this because too many mountains blocked it. Here everything's flat and the ocean's like right over there, so they just barrel right through. So anyway, cool stuff. Yeah, and I guess that's it. I am Charles, this is SirBookSage. Happy reading.